sure. So, well, I tell you what, let's jump in today again. And once again, we got talking trauma here. I need to fix this slide. I don't know why at one time there was a space there between talking trauma. I'll fix that later. So anyway, and I might change the name of this. Who knows? Who knows what it could be. So, but today one of the things I wanted to talk about, as especially here in Kansas, we're going through this stage where we're trying to contact all our students, see where they're at, where are their basic needs, what are the type of things they need. Do they have, as we go online, do they have access to Wi-Fi? Do they have access to a computer, an iPad, whatever is needed to do their work and whatnot. And one of the things that I'm beginning to see and hear from my specialist is, to be honest with you, I don't think kids are ready to learn anything. Or there's quite a big gap between some who are like, man, I can't wait, man, give me some stuff to do, give me some stuff to learn, give me some stuff to digest, to some other people who are just like, man, I don't even know where to start today and whatnot. And so I got to thinking about this, and we talked about it the other day, and it's another thing from Dr. Bruce Perry, and it says dysregulated children in school will not learn. And in fact, I think he has amended that a little bit in another quote that I saw, where dysregulated children in school will learn, but not necessarily what you are trying to teach them. They will learn something else, a new survival skill, as they try to distance themselves from stuff and whatnot. But this whole concept of regulate, relate, and reason, and specifically, we could talk about this in a school setting, but then also, let me get out of this now. So I'll go back to just this. Just a second. I got to remember how to do this. There we go. Maybe it's going to pop up. I want to stop sharing my screen. Oh, there it is. It's right up the top. See, this is different. I'm used to Zoom, and so it's just a little bit different. It's just in the wrong spot. Okay, we're back. But this whole concept of regulate, relate, reason, and I think there's one way to do it, and I think we'll talk about it in general at first, and then maybe gravitate towards, what do we do as these kids now, their classrooms at their house? You might have a class of 10 that's in 10 different environments, so what's that look like? So kind of talk to me about the whole concept of regulate, relate, and reason.
Yeah, so I think for the longest time in education, and we've seen this in the mental health world, we just assume that everyone's in the front of their brain all the time. And the more we understand this stuff, the better we understand this stuff. We encounter students all the time, they're in the back of their brain. And if they're in the back of their brain, then they're not going to be able to learn, as Dr. Perry pointed out there. The only thing we can do back here is the fight, flight, freeze response. And so whether, I think with the pandemic and everything going on right now, I think we really underestimate the amount of stressors that our students are under. I mean, some of these kids are full-time daycare. Some of these kids are working now more than ever to try to provide for their family. Some of these kids are scared all the time. Whenever they're under all these stressors, when that amygdala and that smoke detector is picking up the stress, then these kids in the back of the brain, they can't learn. And so, we talked about in our last YouTube video, but I can't emphasize it enough, is that we got to think primary needs first. So once again, I think awesome, all the schools that are getting out there feeding everybody, that's definitely a primary need. But now this need of being heard, this need of connection, this need of not feeling overwhelmed, all those things are going to be more important than whatever classroom material that we can impart on these students. So, and I really think what Dr. Perry's talking about here is that we have to, if these students are in the back of the brain, we got to move them from the back of the brain to the midbrain to the front of the brain, and that's that process of regulate, relate, and reason. And so, I guess we'll probably talk about that more as we go along here.
Yeah. Well, and it was really interesting. I talked with Jordan Champlin, who's been on these webinars that we had done before. I was talking with her about a few different things yesterday, and she said something that's really, I mean, I know everyone's dealing with stuff in a different way, but one of the things she said, and it really made me start to think, was she said, the students that we have that are primarily always in the front of their brain, you know, that we've dealt with all school year, we've built these relationships, they are rock solid, they are steady, you know, they have barriers, they have different things, but you know what, they're coping well, and they've got good relationships in their life and whatnot. Some of those kids are now operating in the back of their brain for some of them the first time, not the first time, but like the first time for a prolonged period of time. And they're now starting to deal with toxic stress or whatever for the first time. And in some ways, those are the kids who really got to be, you know, mindful of and whatnot.
Right.
And so that was an interesting conversation, and we can get back to that. But I also talked with one of my specialists yesterday, and you know, I'm giving her the list of, you know, we need to reach out to these kids, we need to see what your district's doing, we need, you know, I'm giving her the list, here's your duties, blah 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 blah. And she says to me, she said, Brad, I just want to stop you. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, and she's got her master's degree in social work. And that's the background she came from. And she used to work with some pretty tough kids, doing some teaching and different stuff. And one of the things as we were talking was, or it was kind of this thought of, you know, when they were coming to school every day for 7 hours, and getting away from whatever it was. And now they have no break from whatever that stressor is. And she gave me a specific example. I'm not going to get into that too much, but what that stressor was that this kid was struggling with. And she said, I have yet to be able to reach out to them where they've responded back to me yet. Right. And yeah. And she was like, will they? I hope so. But the parents have also pulled away a little bit as they start to deal with all this stuff. And so as we look at just where we're at right now, and I kind of want you to take this whatever direction you want to. Well, I tell you what, that's what I'll do. I'll share with me what you want to tell people right now about this.
Well, you know, so the way I look at it, you know, obviously this pandemic's difficult. Our students that have healthier, safer homes are going to learn and continue to distance themselves from our traumatized children. That's what's going to happen. So I've seen this with more affluent schools. They're churning out work as if nothing is going on in the world. Those kids are turning it back for the most part. Those kids are going to continue to distance themselves. A lot of the students we work with in JAG, it's not going to be that simple. They're going to be in the back of the brain. We're going to have a hard time regulating them because we have distance, and it's hard to regulate human beings when we have distance. And so I think we just have to be really mindful about our expectations. My expectations for my students are pretty low as far as the academic piece because I understand the challenges that they're facing right now. But that doesn't mean I can't reach out to them, offer support, offer help, try to connect any way I can to be able to try to meet those needs. And so when we talk about this, the first thing, you know, I think a good way to steer this conversation is, you know, what do we do with a dysregulated student, right? So we have tons of dysregulated students right now that are far away from us. I'm going to talk about like, hey, when you come back to school, what are some real tools that you can use? And so the question I ask myself, I greet every student as they come into my classroom, okay? I do that because I'm trying to create those good neural pathways at the front of their brain with a positive interaction, but I also do it because I want to see if they're dysregulated or not when they walk in my classroom. Okay, I see that in a lot of different ways. Do they have a safe and social face? If their face isn't happy to see me back, it's a good indicator they're in the back of the brain. Their body language, are they tense? Are they tight? Those things are their arms crossed? All those things are good indicators if they're dysregulated. And then sometimes it's really obvious. The hoodie's up, and they're shut down, or they might come in flinging F-bombs and yelling and screaming and hollering. Those are pretty obvious ones those students are dysregulated, okay? So I ask myself with every student, are they in the front of their brain or the back of the brain when they're walking to my class? If they're in the back of their brain, that's when we got to use this regulate, relate, reason process that Dr. Perry talks about, okay? What we've done in education forever is we just try to jump to step 3. And we say, oh, I don't like your behavior. I don't like what's going on. Here's your consequence. Here's what's going to happen. I'm kicking you out. You're in trouble. And, oh, you don't like it? Now you're in more trouble. Oh, you still don't like it? Now you're kicked out of school for the rest of the year. You know, we just escalate. What we really have to understand is, hey, they're in the back of their brain. All they can do is fight, flight, freeze. So they can't process what they did. They don't understand where it came from. They can't process your consequences, any of that stuff. So all we want to do with the back of the brain student is calm them down, is help them get their nervous system regulated, okay? And I'll be honest with you, the number one tool, I've used it a zillion times this year, is coloring books. You know, Play-Doh, giving them just a quick opportunity to express themselves. Like, you'd be amazed how well these little regulating tools work. A little bit of lavender, lots of different things. We could do a whole video series on just different coping skills. And so once we get that student, I can typically tell by their body language once they start to move back to the front of the brain. A big indicator I see is the knee bouncing, that leg, all that energy trying to expel. It's a fight response, trying to get out of their body. We're telling them they can't run, they can't move, they're in school. The body's trying to expel that energy any way it can. Okay, and so I see that. Normally the leg will slow down. It's a great indicator, okay? And you can kind of see in their face becomes more safe and social. Is this a person that you would talk to if you didn't know them on the streets? If their face isn't one of those expressions, it's a really good indicator they're still in the back of their brain. So you'll see that body language change. You'll see their expressions change. Now they're in the front of the brain. Now it's super important that we relate to them. Everybody needs to be able to tell their story, okay? Everybody needs to be able to tell their story. So this could be, I'm grabbing them on the way out the door. I'm taking 5 minutes while everybody else is working on something. But give those students an opportunity to express what's going on in their life. And I can't emphasize this enough. Don't try to fix it. Okay, if they want you to fix it, they'll tell you, "Hey,
if I was in church right now, I'd be going, amen, and throwing it up. You know, man, that's awesome. All right, go, amen."
Yeah, so, I appreciate it. And so don't try to fix it. Just let them. Hey, if they're really mad at their last teacher, that's okay. Let them get it out. Let them express it. If they're mad at mom and dad, if they're mad at you, whatever, get it out, express it. We all need to be heard. Okay, and that's where that relate piece. So we got to calm them down with the coping skill. We have to give them an opportunity to express themselves, and don't fix it. Just give them an opportunity to express themselves. And a lot of times, guys, this stuff doesn't take as long as you think it will. A lot of times it's 3 minutes of coloring, 2 minutes of telling their story. And now, boom, now they're in the front of their brain. And now we can talk about it. Hey, what do you think triggered you? And I literally have these conversations with my students. We go, what do you think triggered you? Oh, well, it was this. And what kind of response did you have? Well, I have a fight response when I get triggered, and da-da-da, and that's why I start yelling and screaming. Or I shut down, I have a freeze response, and I put my hoodie up, put my head down until they kick me out of school for the day. You know, and the kids, the more they can understand their own responses and what coping skills work for them, that stuff's super empowering. And now they're in the front of the brain, now they're learning. And I think it's so important for these kids to understand this stuff. Like, hey, what happens when you're in the front of your brain, in the back of your brain, and how do you get yourself to the front of the brain where you can learn, where you can be successful? So we have to go through the process that way. We cannot jump straight to the front of the brain.
Right.
And that's what we've done in education way too long. And we've done it in therapy for way too long. I mean, that's why our PTSD treatments have been so poor in the mental health world for decades and decades, because we're like, you have somebody in a fight, flight, freeze response, and we're like, tell me more about your trauma. And the next thing you know, they're running out of room and they're not coming back to therapy, or they're suicidal. Like, we just didn't understand these brain mechanics well. And I'm not blaming teachers. We all did the best we could with the information we have, but we have new information now. We need to adopt this stuff. And I'll be real with you guys. I have all JAG kids, like most of the people listening. You know, for those of you who don't know JAG, it's an at-risk program. So these kids all have pretty significant traumas in their life. I've never had to kick a kid out of my class the entire year.
Right.
It's not because I'm some super genius, some amazing teacher. It's my first year teaching. I'm struggling every day. But I understand what a dysregulated kid looks like, and I understand how to regulate them. And it's not rocket science. It really, really isn't. And if we could get entire schools, entire districts on board with this process, we wouldn't have the behavioral issues. We wouldn't have the dropout rates. We wouldn't have the negative outcomes that we're having if we can learn to adopt this process that Dr. Perry laid out for us.
Right. And, as I think about that first stage, the regulate stage and whatnot, and you're talking about coloring books, and you're talking about just some of the different quote that I had was, the only way to move from these super high anxiety states to calmer, more cognitive states is rhythm, pattern, repetitive, rhythmic activity, walking, running, dancing, singing, breathing, and then even coloring. And the thing that I was getting to was, I was talking with Jordan once again when we did a PBL together on calm classroom techniques and culture in the classroom and coping mechanisms and stuff, and that she has water in her refrigerator in her classroom. And then when a kid's kind of elevated, one of the things that I've heard her say as we've worked through stuff, and I've even been in her classroom a few times as we worked on this PBL, is she'd ask a kid, do you need to take a lap? And I was always kind of like, let them walk outside to the track, or what's going on? But what she does, the way their school's kind of set up, they're able to walk in the halls, and leads right back to her classroom and whatnot. And it's not a, hey, you know what, you're really dysregulated, hey, you're this. She doesn't call them out. She just says, and she's built a relationship with the class and a classroom culture in which people understand, you know what, I think he needs to chill out. She needs to chill out a little bit.
Right.
And so that's all she'll say. And they'll take the water, and they'll do the lap, and they'll come back in, they'll put the water down. And that might not be the end of it, but it's getting there. And they've had a chance to, and there's no judgment. There's no, hey, you go take a lap because you're dysregulated. And when you get back, we will learn some stuff, which is kind of, and I say that in jest, but that's kind of what, that's how it was when I grew up, except I never got the chance to go for a walk, and I never got water. It was, if I got to walk, it was to walk out to the hallway to sit by myself so I could just think about
more
it.
Shame and more,
right. And everyone that walks down the hallway is going, oh, what's Brad out here for today? That's 17 days in a row. He's sitting out in the hallway. And so when I think about that regulate thing, it's those rhythmic things, almost in some ways mindless, and it's not mindless, but you're able to do things and start to just really not think about necessarily what's triggering you and whatnot, and you can focus on putting one foot in front of the other. You can focus on, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this girl's hair, I want it to be blonde, whatever you're coloring, and you start thinking about something different, and you make enough of those little, what I call micro transactions with your brain. After a while, this is he or she standing in grass, so I want that to be green. And you make some of those things with your coloring books, even all of a sudden that level just starts to drop. And I think,
and that's what I do. I mean, I literally start every class period with this stuff because I know enough of my kids in my line of work are going to be dysregulated every day. And so if I can do that 5 minutes of mindfulness, it's really cool. Why the mindfulness breathing works is our brain is connected to our organ system. Well, our organs are actually the ones that put out all the adrenaline and all these things that make our body have a fight, flight, freeze response. It's not actually our brain. Our brain tells us to do it, but it's the body that does it. And so when you take a deep breath, a big belly breath, that's your diaphragm rubbing against that vagus nerve, and it's calming that response. That's why that stuff works. And there's a physiological, biological reason why this stuff works. And so if I'm doing 5 minutes with my students every day, I'm calming them down. Or we do a lot of walks too. A day like today, it's beautiful out. I take them for a walk. I get it's 5 minutes of my 46 minutes of instruction, but I promise you, if I have all my students in the front of their brain, they're more regulated. They'll do better in my class, and they'll do better in other people's classes too. And so, because the bottom line is, you can be the greatest teacher in the world. You can be phenomenal, but if they're back here, they're not going to learn. And so for us to figure out how to unlock those front of those brains as educators is so paramount. It's way more important than any instructional strategy in mankind, in my opinion. It's really paramount. So we really got to recognize dysregulated kids. We could probably do a whole nother conversation just based on that. But then, using those coping skills and those techniques to get those kids back to the front of the brain.
So do you think there is, how do I want to put this? Do you think there's a way to do this? I know we've talked about, okay, when schools come back in and we talk about regulate, relate, reason, for once school starts again. Do you think there's a way to do this now, in our current normal, which is, you're the teacher, Josh, right now, you're talking to me, and I'm sitting there, immediately as you trying to Zoom call with me or 3 or 4 kids, and I'm just like, you can't be serious right now. And then like every part of what you're looking at says, this is stupid. I've got headphones in, like I'm literally not listening to you. I've got my hoodie up, I'm just sitting there. Can this work in this setting?
I think it's infinitely more difficult.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
There's no doubt. but I would try to follow up that student and find out what's going on with them. You know, once again, not judgment, not punishment, not, hey, what's your routine looking like? What's your, we talked dosing last week. Are you doing enough dosing to deal with the stress? Is there additional stressors going on in your life? I had a student like a week before we got quarantined. He's been an amazing student all year, and we were doing this resume project. I could not get him to write his name on top of the paper. And I remember I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, what the heck? I have a great relationship. I poured into this kid.
Right.
This kid, and he won't even write his freaking name down for me. Well, then I follow up with him, and you find out all this horrible stuff's going on in his life just in the last week, right? And he's got this teacher threatening to kick him out of school, and this one does, and it's just like the behavior always makes sense when you get to the bottom of it, right? And so with that student being disrespectful for you on your Zoom, I promise you there's a reason for it. Try to figure out what that is. A lot of times the kids don't know. They don't know that what's going on in their life is affecting them. They don't know a lot of times that they're outwardly expressing themselves in ways that they didn't realize before. And so, meet them with love, meet them with empathy. That's always the key. But I can't empathize with all my teachers out there because it's hard, man. You got a great lesson. You poured into this kid. You've done this work, whatever it might be. It's hard when they're disrespectful. It's hard when their behavior isn't the way you want it to be. But if you just, if you're able to stay calm yourself, I always say this in one of my trainings. Calm creates calm, chaos creates chaos, right? And so if a kid's flipping out and you can stay Fonzie cool, it's going to help the other students stay cool, and ultimately it's going to help calm that kid down. If you're chaotic when the students are chaotic, you got no chance. That's never happened in the history of mankind, as somebody helped somebody else calm down that was upset themselves, right? And so I find this extraordinarily difficult to do as a parent. It's way harder as a parent. As a teacher, I'm pretty solid at it, I'll be honest with you. Every once in a while, one time I started to get a little upset, and I'll never forget a student looked at me like, hey, Mr. Varner looks like he's getting upset. And I was like, you're right, let's go for a walk. And it was good for me. I had to regulate myself in that moment. I had a couple, a bunch of kids that just wouldn't kind of follow directions, wouldn't quiet down. And so, that's good for them to see you're a human being too, that you're going to, you have to work on this your whole life. I don't think any of us get to get out of life without having to cope and deal with stress and all those things.
Right. Yeah, I've heard something similar where it's a dysregulated child can't be regulated by a dysregulated adult.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can do that. And so, that's really good. And what's funny is I got out of coaching too early. I should restart my career. I coached forever.
Sure.
And I was, for people from my generation, I was the Bob Knight. Now, I wasn't like throwing stuff around the gym or whatnot, but hyper competitive. And what's funny is I've learned trauma. I'm starting to understand a little bit why maybe I was that way, but we won't get into that. But hyper competitive. Couldn't stand losing. Wrapped my entire self-worth around did we win or not. And that was as a player, and then even more so as a coach, to be honest with you, because you take a lot of that, like, yeah, my players didn't do what we practiced, but that's my fault and whatnot, and put a lot of that stuff on. And so I often wondered, like, I'd go home, I'd be like, why did we play so bad? As I look back on it now, I'm like, we played so bad because I never once took the pedal off the gas, where I'm just like, what are you guys doing? I can't believe this, and all this different stuff. And I'm just going off. Right. And it's the same way in teaching, like we said, and this isn't the best teachers. Like I agree with you. I think we've done what we knew was the best thing to do at the time, and I have 30 kids in this class, and this one kid is just derailing the whole thing. Well, I need to kick him out. I need him to kick him out because I got 29 other kids that have to do this. And it was interesting as I've done this stuff with the Calm Classroom stuff. When you create that culture in your classroom, and it sounds like you've done it too. When you create that culture in your classroom where other people can understand, hey, you know what, Jimmy right now is struggling, and that's okay. And I can still keep on learning. Mr. Varner's going to go work with Jimmy for a second, and we're going to get back into this. And, and they start to realize, you know what, we've all had a coloring book in front of us at one point or another. And so,
I agree.
You're not being shamed,
No, and it really comes from them. I'm not an expert in classroom culture by any stretch of the imaginations, but I just teach these kids about front of the brain, back of the brain. And what it is, they just start understanding the human experience better. Like I love, we call this trauma-informed care movement. That's a really cool name for, hey, do you understand the human condition, right? And so I can't tell you how many times I've had kids come in and be like, hey, just so you know, so-and-so's about to come in here. Their boyfriend did X, Y, Z, and they're really upset and they're going to need help, blah, blah, blah. Or I've had kids that like their head will be down the entire class period. And then we weren't able to get them regulated because you're not always going to be able to get them regulated. Okay?
Right.
You're just not.
Right.
But then the next day we'll come back and they'll process and be like, hey, sorry, I felt this way. This was going on. Or another student will be like, yeah, you're really dysregulated. You know, they don't say dysregulated. They'll say,
Right.
your brain,
Yeah.
you know, you did it, put your hoodie up and put your head down. And here's the deal. I can push and push and push. And all I'm going to do is sever my relationship with that student.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to cause an outburst. That kid's letting you know, hey, I need a little bit of space, right? It doesn't mean I don't check in on them. Doesn't mean I don't try to support them. But you got to know when not to push them too far, too. And so, but it's amazing because they're all teachable moments for not only that student, but every other kid in the room.
Yes.
I'm glad that you kind of brought that up. Because
Yes.
at the end of the day, if I got 15 kids in a class, all 15 kids are responsible for wiring each other's brains, front of the brain, back of the brain. And
Right.
I have those conversations with students, and they know, hey, the kinder, the gentler, the nicer, and, you know, we're all going to heal through this process. And I think that's, to me, the best thing that happened with me this year with JAG was watching these kids help each other heal. I mean, they did way more for each other than I ever did for them.
Yes. And that's amazing. And so I know we wanted to keep this at 15, 20, 25 minutes or so. And I think we're getting there between the part 1 and part 2. And I wanted to give you a chance to just kind of tie this up how you would like. And then I have one little words of wisdom that I saw that I just want to throw out there to whoever ends up watching this, and then we'll be done. But, you know, your final thoughts.
Yeah, just once again, I think we can all get better at recognizing those dysregulated kids, finding coping skills, and then giving them a chance to regulate through a conversation. Once again, you're not trying to fix it. You're trying to give them an opportunity to express themselves. And ultimately, then you're going to unlock that front of the brain where those students can learn. So the more we can learn about this process, and hopefully maybe we'll do some more videos about dysregulated kids, coping skills, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, with everything's going on in the world today, let's not put too much pressure on our kids or our teachers that we have to just churn out this curriculum. I think that's a mistake. I think we really need to be able to support these kids, meet their needs. Some of our kids are going to do a great job. They're going to learn a whole lot during this outage. Some kids, I think if we're expecting much out of them, we're not understanding their biology very well. And so hopefully people understand that a little bit better after today.
Right. And I love what you said about our teachers as well. And that was the part that I wanted to end with. Was last week I talked about how the word that I would use for how we need to deal with the other people in our sphere of influence is grace, because this is not normal. And people, you know, after talking with Jordan yesterday, like I said, realizing that, you know, some of the people that we've always thought have been rock solid maybe won't be rock solid right now. And so there's that showing people grace and really having that in the forefront of our brain is that idea of grace. But then also for ourselves being grateful for things and whatnot. But then, you know, one of the things I said last week was we have to give ourselves some grace too. And so I saw this, it's a lady named Lisa Oliveira, I think it is. And it was just on a trauma site that I'm a part of. I don't know if she's a teacher. I don't know, an administrator. You know, I'm not sure who she is, but she's the one who said it. And it said, a soft reminder as we enter a new week. We, all of us, are currently going through a collective traumatic experience. Trauma is often thought of as too much, too fast, which is exactly what's happening. Of course, we're exhausted. Of course, you're afraid. Of course, you're overwhelmed. Of course, you're clinging to certainty in the midst of so much unknown. Of course, you aren't as productive, feeling foggy, or wondering how you can possibly go through so many waves of emotions all in the same day. This all makes so much sense in the context of our circumstances. Be gentle with yourself. Have compassion for your process. Give yourself grace. You are good, no matter how you are managing this completely new experience. And I think,
love it.
Yeah. And I think that's what I want to tell anyone who watches, any specialist, any CSA, any program director, any whoever from Jag, or, you know, there's even people outside of Jag that are watching this. And whoever you are, don't beat yourself up. You really aren't equipped to handle COVID-19 pandemic. We haven't had any practice. And, you know, you do the best you can, and you evaluate, and then you do better. And, you know, in some ways, this is building a skill. You know, we'll get to the end of this, and we'll just be like, man, we're just checking off boxes on our daily stuff. You know, as you start to adjust to what's the new normal, and then all of a sudden it's going to go back to how it was before. And we're going to be like, you know, I kind of liked my little checklist I made every day. I kind of liked, you know, whatever that was. It helped me stay regulated and whatnot. And so that's what I want to tell people out there. Be grace driven to others and to yourself. And we're all going to get through this together. I'm excited. Once again, I'm Brad Lingenfelder. I'm with Jag Kansas, and this was Josh Varner from Jag Missouri. And you know, I just love his insight, and I love talking about this stuff, and I hope you guys are enjoying it too. We'll put out another one later. We keep on talking about topics. Who knows what it'll be, but be looking for these, and we'll go from there. So,
Thanks for the opportunity.
all right.
Appreciate
See
it,
you guys. Yep.